Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Tina and I'm the Capability Building Coordinator for Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand. Connecting Up is a part of the Info Exchange Group. Info Exchange is a not-for-profit social enterprise that has delivered technology for social justice for over 25 years. With over 100 staff across Australia and New Zealand, we tackle the biggest social challenges through the smart and creative use of technology. I'd like to welcome you all to the webinar Peer-to-Peer and DIY Fundraising, which will be presented by Jess Pearson and Ben Hoff from Blackboard. We'll start with a little bit of housekeeping. All lines are muted, so if you have any technical issues, please type it into the questions box on your webinar panel and I'll be able to assist you through there. If you have any questions during the session, please also type it into the questions box and Jess and Ben will answer them in the Q&A section at the end of the webinar. Please note that your comments and questions will not appear to the entire group. If you are on a Wi-Fi connection and have multiple programs open, this can sometimes affect the quality of your audio and video of the webinar. If possible, please close all other programs to help you have the best experience. Please note that the webinar is being recorded and a link to the recording and the slides will be sent to you shortly after the webinar ends. Before we start, I'd also like to remind you that there will be a short survey at the end of the webinar. We'd appreciate it if you took a few minutes to provide us with some feedback. That's all from me for now. I'll hand it over to Jess and Ben to get things started. Thanks, Jess and Ben.
Thank you, Tina, and hello everyone, and thank you again for joining us for today's webinar, which is going to be covering off what we call the 3 pillars of peer-to-peer fundraising success, which is really going to help you grow your income as well as growing your reach. As Tina mentioned, my name is Ben Hoff, and I head up our account management team here at Blackboard, and I'm joined by one of my team here, Jess Pearson, who is our National Business Development Manager. Hi, everyone. So to take you for a quick walkthrough of what we will cover today, first we're going to touch on the crowd fundraising landscape and as we see it here at Blackboard. Then we're going to take a dive into what are the 3 pillars of fundraising, how do we measure success, and then take an even more detailed look at those individual pillars, which are DIY fundraising or community fundraising, single charity events, and then how to leverage what we call MCE events or multi-charity events. And then we'll round that out with some questions at the end. So when we first take a look at what is crowdfunding or crowd fundraising or peer-to-peer fundraising, essentially it's the idea of, or the practice of funding a project or a venture by raising small amounts of money from a large number of people, typically via the internet. So as we know, peer-to-peer, it's about asking your peers, seeking support from friends and family, those around you, to support a cause or a project or something similar that's close to your heart. But really, it's about reaching more people, raising more money, elevating your brand, and ultimately changing more lives. And hopefully what we have to share with you today will help you achieve each of those there. So first, let's take a step back and have a look at the giving landscape. And the data I'm about to show you is from the Blackboard Peer-to-Peer Giving Index, which was recently released. And basically, it's stating that the age of Gen X has arrived. And what these stats are really telling us is that the splits are changing. And obviously, our younger demographics, our millennials, our Gen Xers, etc., are the ones that are giving ultimately more. But what it's really telling us is that they're really working across multiple channels, and it's playing into how those donors support you. When we have a look at that in the context of peer-to-peer fundraising, what's most exciting is that we're seeing they're not just giving, but they're also fundraising and supporting you through activities as well, which presents a huge opportunity to really, I guess, attract a wide array of a supporter base. Because you're not just looking at those who have the capacity to give, but also those who are passionate and want to go out there and share their passion for your cause. So then when we take a look at the evolving digital fundraising landscape, this is a spectrum that we like to share on lots of meetings here at Blackboard because it really shares and shows what the peer-to-peer space is doing. Many of us are very familiar with what we'd call the left side of the spectrum, our org-driven side. And this is really tapping into your more traditional fundraising events, such as your community runs or walks, your 5Ks, etc. The things that many charities have done for so many years, or even your more traditional events where you're maybe hosting a gala or those sorts of events where you as an organization are coming up with the concept, you're setting a date, you're setting a time, you're basically controlling every element of it, and your supporters are either going to show up because they're able to and they're willing to support you, or if they can't make it on that set day, you're going to essentially miss out on their support. Because of that, we're seeing a shift towards the right-hand side of the spectrum, which is known as individual-driven. And this is really where we can start to see a few elements of the three pillars start to come to life in your community fundraising, this idea of virtual events. But what that means is, instead of just you controlling every single aspect of an opportunity for a supporter to show their support for you, where they have to show up on a certain day or at a certain time, we're actually giving that flexibility back to them. And this is what we're hearing from supporters when we talk to them. This is what they're looking for. They're wanting that flexibility to do it more on their own terms and in their own time. So now I'm going to pass over to Jess, who's going to walk us through at a high level the three pillars of fundraising.
Thanks, Ben. Good morning, everyone. So yeah, when we work with our charity partners here at Blackboard, they're typically working with within the three pillars. Often some organisations, it's pretty typical actually, that they'll come into the Blackboard family and they want to focus on multi-charity events. These events that they can piggyback off. They don't have to run their own events, get permits and close roads and things like that. So that's a nice thing. You don't have to manage these events yourselves, but it helps to actively recruit and support those runners that choose you so that they become successful fundraisers. So there's still a bit of effort, and we do see that the more you sort of resource multi-charity event fundraising, the better you'll do. Often after an organisation has really sort of jumped in and cut their teeth on peer-to-peer fundraising through the multi-charity events, so to speak, they then might look at a signature event. This might be a traditional offline event that they then want to bring online, or they might have a new concept and they want to wrap their brand around it and turn it into a signature event. So this can be a community walk, a run, a ride, a biggest morning tea, a 40-hour famine, etc. And look, they can require ticketing and road closures, etc., or they can be virtual events where you come up with a concept like a loud shirt day, where you're inviting supporters to wear a bright, colourful shirt for the day and engage in their own community or in their own workplace. The third one is DIY fundraising, and this sees individuals or teams creating their own fundraiser for an organisation, such as jumping out of a plane, hiking a trail, shaving their head, paddling as a group from A to B. And these fundraisers are highly passionate. They basically don't need an event to join. They're dedicated enough to create their own. So a vibrant peer-to-peer fundraising program tends to impact an entire organisation with really positive stories that are really motivating for your team. And peer-to-peer can sit alongside multiple fundraising streams, not necessarily all of the streams on the screen at the moment, but we are seeing more and more inventive ways to harness peer-to-peer fundraising. So as you're planning your traditional fundraising streams, think about how it may, streamline your processes and increase revenue by adding peer-to-peer as an extra element. And this sort of makes it the icing on the cake, if you will. So for example, if you've got some business partnerships, they may be doing some payroll giving, etc. Think about how you might approach those businesses and find out if they'd be willing to do a peer-to-peer fundraising activity on a specific day for you. Gold coin collections are definitely coming online now. The Red Shield appeal and these sorts of campaigns are definitely coming online to some degree. Often in a staged process. They're not going to just, put the tins in the cupboard forever, so to speak, but bringing it online enables people to digitally attract donations. And given that something like 20%, I think, Ben, of our donations come from overseas, obviously, you're able to open up, donations to, family members who are living overseas and who can't be there physically to pop a gold coin in the tin, so to speak. In memory, that's one that a lot of organisations are adding online fundraising to enable people again, who perhaps can't attend a funeral service, to still participate in a family's giving. And then there's appeals. Can you add a peer-to-peer element there to create a greater engagement type of exercise for one of your appeals? And really importantly, how are you promoting your online fundraising to your website visitors? Is it easy to find it on your website? Are you requiring online fundraisers to fill in a fundraising application form, or have you removed those barriers to make it really quick and easy for them to create a page and get started? I guess the other thing I just want to mention while I'm on this slide is that one of the risks that I see sometimes with a community fundraising program is when it sits wholly with a fundraising coordinator or a community engagement officer. I think that by assigning it to just one person in the team, peer-to-peer can get quite siloed, and the variety of ways it can be utilised are not thought about by the whole team or organisation, and this can reduce opportunities and impact and energy of the program. So you really want to try and embed it into the psyche of the whole team, right to the very top. Measuring success. So it helps when measuring success that you've got some benchmarks to start with. So these statistics are from 2018 and across the Everyday Hero platform in Australia. These also include only active pages, that is pages that have raised over $1. I saw that there's a few New Zealand charities on the line, which is awesome. We've also got these stats in New Zealand. So what I will do is add those New Zealand stats into the slide deck before I send it off to Tina for her to send it around. But basically in Australia, in this period, major community events had an average active fundraising page of $810. Signature event fundraisers raised an average of $658, and DIY fundraisers raised on average an enormous $1,786. And when you look a little bit more deeply at this, non-branded fundraising pages raised a tip under $1,400, and the pages that were branded to the charity raised 55% more to $2,174. So we're definitely seeing a renewed interest in the DIY space because of the incredible results that they're bringing in, and we generally see that this DIY gets the least attention of the three, which is a bit of a missed opportunity because it takes typically the least effort to manage. Also, just a note on this slide, the average for the signature events is probably a little bit lower than the others because, of the high volume of sort of community walk events where traditionally it's a really engagement piece for a charity and not necessarily so much for fundraising. If you're planning a signature event that's an endurance run or an endurance ride or something like that, you can be guaranteed that average is going to be way higher than that. So, goal setting. You can only measure success if you set some goals. So often when I speak with organisations, they're quite vague about a lot of this. And it might be because I'm speaking with a fundraising coordinator that might not be engaged with the organisational goals on a daily basis. Still, it's really important to think strategically about these and getting input from leadership, which is actually a really good way to engage them and bring them along on the journey. So here are some of the goals that are useful to know. What are your overall fundraising goals as an organisation? Do you have any critical business issues that could be solved or alleviated by peer-to-peer fundraising? For example, have you got a challenge of low brand awareness or low supporter engagement? Or do you need to diversify funding? Or do you have an aging database? What are your immediate needs? And can these tie in with a peer-to-peer fundraising campaign? For example, let's say you want to build a library in a rural village and you know it's going to be $25,000. You could perhaps run a readathon in local schools to raise funds and awareness of your project. And what do you want to achieve online versus offline? And how can you integrate both for a holistic view? Then drilling a little bit more deeply into specifically peer-to-peer goals, what might your campaign objectives be? What might be a reasonable page target to ask your supporters to reach? It needs to be realistic, but a bit of a stretch. And you want to think about your demographic, and if you're putting together a challenge, is it a really difficult challenge? In which case, sometimes we see with endurance rides, for example, they might have a fundraising target set at $3,000 as an example. What might a page target mean to your organisation? For example, $3,000 might fund a family camp or something like that. How many active fundraisers would you need to recruit to reach your campaign goal? And what average gift do you anticipate from each donor, etc. Donor handles themselves can be really interesting. I remember with UNHCR had a dollar handle once of $1,422, really quite specific, and that was for an education supplement for an Afghani woman. So you can be really quite branded in your donation dollar handles. And what brand reach do you need to achieve? I find that, if a customer has pretty loose goals, and often they do, we can work backwards. Let's say they want to raise, $80,000 for a campaign. They've got let's stick with the cycle event. They want to do an endurance cycle event where the average is around $3,000 per cyclist. Then we can work backwards and say, okay, well, you'll need 26 active fundraisers. Given that some registrants might not activate, you therefore want to maybe aim to attract 35 participants, knowing that some will drop off. So that gives you something to go towards. How can we recruit 35 participants? So looking at the peer-to-peer formula, measuring success across several key metrics will enable you to map your progress and compare year-on-year results. And really importantly, it will help you identify areas that might be a bit weak and which could use some attention to grow fundraising year on year. So let's take a look at this formula. So firstly, there's acquisition or recruitment. By setting up a peer-to-peer campaign or tapping into a major community event, you're providing the opportunity for a new audience to engage with your cause. So your participants, they'll be reaching out to their networks, asking for donations. They're your ambassadors. So recruitment strategies will likely be approaching your existing pool of supporters through multi-channel marketing. You might want to approach local schools, business and sports clubs. You might include targeted Facebook ads, maybe lookalike advertising, Google AdWords, etc. Conversion is the measure that we use whereby we can see how supporters are engaging with their fundraising page. It's those people who sign up to create a page and then click to activate their page. So to increase conversions, the task is to encourage them to personalize their page with a story, a photo, some messages, some pictures on their feed, sharing it out to social media. And, this is really critical. I pull reports weekly for my clients, and there is an absolute correlation to page personalization and fundraising results. And here's a tip for you. The story section, which sits at the top of a fundraising page, which is where a person writes their own personal story of why they're participating, it is absolutely the most valuable. When we pull reports, I often see, because we've got that sort of granular oversight around what people are doing on their page. And to make a comparison, putting up a photo is really important. They raise a lot of money when they put up a photo, but when they put up a story, they will typically double what they would raise if they've just put up a photo. So that's really important. Activation occurs when a first gift is added to a page, and our data shows that the first gift is best to land within the first 24 to 48 hours of the page being created. And the value of the gift is important too. Because of social norming, subsequent donors will often follow the value of that first gift. So obtaining that first gift from a close relative who may be very generous is a really good tip. So strategies to help you activate your supporters include developing a fundraising guide with some really simple tips, and we can obviously help you with those. Because you've got to remember that a lot of your supporters have probably never done this before. So a really nice little branded PDF with some tips is helpful. You might want to give them a call when they sign up to connect with them and find out what's motivating them. Let them know how their fundraising will help you achieve your mission. And really let them know that, if they use direct and personal emails to their networks, it's going to really help them be successful. They don't want to rely just on social media broadcasting. It just won't work as well. Personal direct emails are the way to go, and with social media as a broadcasting strategy next. And also communicating with fundraisers, it's obviously a highly resource-intensive exercise. So you can consider triggered behavioural communications. A lot of platforms now offer those, and these are real-time emails based on what a supporter's done on their page. So let's say they've shared their page, but they haven't put up a story yet. They'll then get that next call to action, which would be like, hey, well done, you've started your fundraising, now why don't you put up a story and let people know why you care. Retention, this hinges on your supporters' experience, how much they've enjoyed their fundraising experience with you. It's so important to acknowledge and thank them for their effort and the funds they've raised for you. And bringing fundraiser and their donor data into your donor management tool is so important so that you can continue the relationship and learn how else they may like to contribute to your cause. And then you've got averages. Knowing your averages will really let you tweak and refine your strategies year on year. We always pull the averages on every single campaign review we do. We love it because we can see really quickly what needs tweaking. So you want to look at your conversion and your activation rates, average raised per page, average gift, the number of gifts per page, email opens and click-through rates, what the averages are looking like across individuals and team fundraising. All that sort of stuff is really, really useful to see. And in terms of some benchmarking, here is just some stats for you to think about, when you're running your own program. Here are some stats over the last 12 months through Everyday Hero. The activation rate that we're seeing platform-wide is 67.5%. Everyday Hero fundraisers on average are raising $710. And we're seeing 78%, so almost 4/5 of all donors are covering the total fees associated with their donation, which is meaning the effective fee is about 1 to 2%. So this is a very cost-effective fundraising stream for you when you compare it to your direct mail and your other programs. Okay, so now let's deep dive into the 3 pillars. And I'm going to look at DIY fundraising, and then Ben is going to look at signature events and MCE fundraising. So DIY fundraising, this caters to really that evolving fundraising landscape that Ben spoke about earlier, because it's enabling people to support you in a way that they want to. It allows unrestricted creativity, all about encouraging supporters' independence. Really creates a rich community of fundraisers. And really importantly, DIY provides year-round revenue and engagement. So it's going to help you attract a new audience of fundraisers and donors. And really importantly, it can help you identify future major givers, regular givers, and volunteers. I mean, if someone's going to go to the effort of creating a DIY fundraiser for you, you know they're dedicated. I know certainly for me, the first time I fundraised for my charity, when I started at Blackboard 8 years ago, I chose a charity, I did some fundraising. I still love them to this day. I became a regular giver about 6 months after I did that peer-to-peer fundraising. I ran in the city to surf with them. I became a regular giver. My mum became a regular giver. My dad's donated to them, and they are still my #1 favourite charity. So it really builds loyalty, and they really haven't done much to keep me sticky except send me a fabulous quarterly newsletter, which I love. Anyway, and also, as you can see here, the average page raises nearly $1,800, which is amazing. So I really encourage you to think about your DIY fundraising program. It's quite a light touch in terms of resourcing for you to manage. In terms of DIY, having different channels can provide inspiration for your fundraisers, such as, create your own memorials, in celebration fundraising, where people will create a page in lieu of gifts for a birthday, a wedding, or an anniversary. Think about fundraising at work, school, and clubs. You can have project-focused community fundraising. You can have activity-focused community fundraising. And why this is really interesting is that it will enable you to segment your data afterwards, so you can see what people have chosen to do for you, especially around the project focus, which will enable you to send them relevant communications and invitations to certain events, etc., moving forward. So here's a case study. This is Bowel Cancer New Zealand. So this is a really nice case study for a couple of reasons. Firstly, they're a very small team. They implemented online fundraising in order to launch their new brand identity in the community, as well as to increase fundraising revenue. And now they're active across all of the 3 pillars, the DIY, the MCEs through the Auckland Marathon, as well as signature events with their Decembeard campaign and others. But specifically in their DIY, since 2017, so in just a pip under 2 years, they've had 390 active fundraisers. They are people that have raised over $1. On average, those fundraisers have received 13 donations per page. Average gift is $59.62, which is pretty standard for DIY fundraising. It's not like a corporate, high-level event where the average gift is going to be $300. Community fundraising, the average often is a little bit lower, so that's pretty much on point, I would say. They're raising on average $824 per page. In that time, they have amounted nearly 3,000 opt-in supporters for their database for future stewardship, and they raised $321,000. And Rebecca Heel, the ED at Bowel Cancer New Zealand, has said, peer-to-peer fundraising is perfect for our size charity with limited resources to reach a large audience while also being realistic for us to manage and grow our results year on year. I also want to mention something about superstar fundraisers. I mentioned before that, a great byproduct of DIY fundraising is identifying superstar fundraisers. And this is a good example where 4 fundraisers embarked on an ultra marathon around Mount Everest, and they wanted to fundraise for Heart Kids. So Heart Kids recognised that these 4 people were going to be serious fundraisers, and so they went to a little bit of extra effort and spent, maybe 20, 30 minutes, and they set up a campaign specifically branded for them so that their pages, really reflected these 4 fundraisers. And it was well worth the effort because Colin here raised over $185,000. So you'll really find that your superstar fundraisers are your most passionate supporters. They're your advocates, they're your voice. They will give enormous time and energy and acquire significant new donors for you. And as I said before, they're your future major givers, bequesters and regular givers, and really they're the equivalent of a major donor in terms of value to your organisation as they're doing their fundraising. So just some last essential tips when you think about your DIY fundraising. So think about creating a series of branded DIY campaigns to inspire action, such as that create your own memorial, celebration, project-based fundraising, etc. Of course, if your resources are super limited, you can just create one and brand it, and then that can act as a catch-all for all of those DIY fundraisers. Make sure it's meaningful with impact messaging. Make it super easy to find on your website. Remove any barriers to entry. We don't advocate that you have for DIY online fundraisers and a fundraising application form that they have to fill in. I mean, just, let them create their page. When they create a page through our system, they get an email which acts as their authority to fundraise. So all the regulations are taken care of, and you'll get a notification when a page has been created so you can jump into action and check it out. Make sure that you're promoting your fundraisers through your newsletters and across your social media. They make great stories to share. And celebrate your fundraisers with thank yous and special invitations, maybe an honor roll on your website. And lastly, and very importantly, as I mentioned before, make sure you import or integrate, if your systems allow, integrate your peer-to-peer data into your CRM to keep your supporter records up to date for future stewardship. So now I'm going to hand you back to Ben now, who's going to talk you through signature events.
Great, thanks, Jess. And so when we think about signature events, often we'll initially think of, all the big names, the big hitters out there in the space, the likes of 40-Hour Famine, the ones that have been around for years that might raise significant funds. And whilst they fall into this category, really what a signature event is, as a charity, it's what, it's your main event that you may run on an annual basis. So, it doesn't really matter on the size, it's how it appeals to your audience and your supporter base. But on screen there are just a few of the ones around Australia and New Zealand. You've got your your big ones, like we said, World Vision, their events. You've got Can for Cancer, but there's a few others that we'll sort of touch on as starting to come into the space, which have a little bit of a difference to them. So just stepping back to this landscape spectrum again, like I said earlier, many signature events sit right on the left side of the spectrum. They're more traditional, held on a set day at a set time. But what we kind of want to share with you today is something new and fresh, and it's this idea of virtual events. So what is a virtual event? These aren't necessarily new in the sense that, there's been events where people can do it in their own time, but it's really the technology that it's leveraging that's helping bring these events to life. And a virtual event, as we see it, is the idea of bringing community, fundraising, and fitness together. And you might ask, why are events going virtual? Why are we seeing a shift away from the left side of the spectrum? One, the market's slowing in the traditional sense. It's saturated. There's so many, pretty much every organization has a walk or something, and especially if you're in the competitive charity spaces such as cancer and kids cancer, health, etc. There's a lot of organizations that run very similar events. So we're seeing the market be saturated, and it's also therefore slowing. Everyone is getting busier. People just seem to be more busy than ever, really. So what virtual events help do is reduce the barriers of time and geography. Like I said, they're about letting people take part on their own terms, in their own time. It removes the resources required to organize physical events. So anyone that's run a physical event would typically know that there's, at least the first time round, there's at least an 18-month to 24-month planning period and lead time. But then as soon as you get into the swing of it, you're back planning for the following year as soon as the current year's event has finished. Whereas with virtual events being digital, that's not as big a worry. Eliminates external factors such as weather. For those of you in New Zealand, we had the sad, stories around the Christchurch shooting. I know we work with a lot of some of the cancer societies, and they run their Relay for Life events, and there was other charities that had to cancel their events because of external factors. It wasn't weather in that case, but there were factors which prevented the events from happening. As I said, it creates differentiation within a cause area. And I think the most exciting one is that it provides a higher margin on your fundraising returns because there's not as much expense that needs to go into it. So you're probably thinking, what's an example of a virtual event? So really the idea is it's taking this idea of people that are doing an activity in their own time already. So typically when it's fitness related, it might be that they're out taking a run or a walk on a regular basis, and it's combining that activity with a fundraising sort of cause messaging. And the one that's on screen is for Ronald McDonald House, and they had a really great concept that they created last year, where basically they identified that all of the families that have to travel from around the country to the Ronald McDonald houses have to travel a total of 100,000 kilometres every year. So what they did was they challenged their alumni, actually, so families, past families, to try and go house to house by logging the equivalent number of kilometres collectively, obviously, not individually, in order to support the Ronald McDonald House throughout the month of March. So there's just some graphics you can see there, but on the next slide, what we can see is the success of it. So using the fitness tracking, which you can see on the screen there on the supporter page on the bottom right-hand corner, when people connect their fitness tracker, so whether it be MapMyFitness, Strava, or a Fitbit, up to their fundraising page, it automatically logs their activity on the page for them. So if they go out for a run in the morning, that automatically contributes to their total on their fundraising page. And what we see is that the engagement level of those with a fitness tracker connected is 58% higher than those without one. And in turn, that drives their fundraising outcomes. So Ronald McDonald managed to raise over $190,000 from 676 people in the year one of the campaign. 67% of those pages raised more than $1. 9 donations per page. So you're thinking that every participant is bringing with them likely to be 9 donors. An average donation of $48, so it's a little bit lower than what we saw with DIY. And often we see that the average donation connects with the size of the challenge. And then $433 per fundraising page. So with virtual, whilst the averages might be slightly lower than your traditional signature events, the great thing with them is because they're so accessible, everyone can sign up really. You don't have to show up on that set day and at a set time. You can sort of get involved and run across the period of a month rather than having to commit to a single day. So that gives you an idea of signature events and sort of what we're seeing in the space. I would say this one, however, is probably the most exciting pillar. And if you're sort of just getting started with peer-to-peer fundraising, very similar to DIY community fundraising, it's more about being involved than anything, because there's plenty of opportunity out there. So you might be asking, what are multi-charity events? These are all the major fund runs that are run by a third party throughout both Australia and New Zealand. And Blackboard actually partners with the majority of them as the fundraising platform. And as a member of our platform, you actually have the benefit of being able to be a beneficiary in these events. So you've got all the big hitters like City to Surf, Run Melbourne, Auckland Marathon, but then your more, your niche events like your Tough Mudders and Colour Runs. There's plenty of opportunity out there. And these events, you don't have to put any planning in terms of actually running the event. It's more about communicating it to your supporter base and being a part of the drop-down list in the registration flows so that people can see that you're a beneficiary and choose to fundraise for you. And the most exciting thing is often charities will have supporters of theirs already participating in the event. They just don't know that they can be fundraising for your charity. So when we look at some success stories, obviously, the real big players like your Beyond Blue and Cure Brain Cancer, your cancer societies, they're all doing fantastic in these events, obviously, because they have very high awareness. But what I wanted to share with you today is 4 charities across 2 events, Run Melbourne and City to Surf in Australia. And to be completely honest, I've been working with Everyday Hero Blackboard for 8 years as well. And these are 4 charities which I've actually never personally interacted or even seen their names mentioned. So I'm going to take a stab and say that they're quite small, but the results are certainly not small. As you can see, community living and respite services in the Run Melbourne, I'm assuming a very specific organisation that has a very specific following of supporters managed to have 120 participants fundraising for them and raise $77,000. So this is an event where they did not have to organise any road closures, do any marketing to promote the event to get registrations, etc. They simply had to let their supporter base know and be visible in drop-down lists that they could be fundraised for. And what a fantastic result. You've got Feel the Magic in City to Surf, raised nearly $60,000 from 72 pages. But I think what's exciting is the average raised well over $1,000. So obviously they had a very passionate group of supporters running for them. But then I think, when you step down, the Next Step Foundation in City to Surf, $12,000 from 20 pages, which is fantastic. If I could ask you or challenge you to do anything next year, it's to be a part of these events and go and form a team in at least one event and see what can come of that effort. Because often it's those close relationships that you already hold. Those people are more than willing to take on the challenge for you. So when we look at MCE events, what are the essential tips? So plan which events to focus on. So if you're a local cause rather than a national one, pick one that has a close proximity to your supporters. Perhaps you've had people support you previously, and think about what your resource capability is. Often, there's lots of different events, but you'll find that the smaller charities will often just pick one and channel their efforts into that. Set some goals. So like I said, go and form a team, try and form a team of 20 participants, whatever it may be, and put a challenge out there to those participants and say, we're challenging you to raise $1,000 because, this $1,000 will help us do X, Y, and Z. On that note, create a team experience. Often the bigger brands, but you can certainly do it as a smaller brand, create this almost like a sub-brand of theirs. So Team RSPCA as an example, Heart Races is, Heart Foundation in New Zealand. There's plenty of things that you can put a play on your organization's name, and it kind of gives an identity to those particular participants. Acquire your fundraisers. So the best place to start is your supporter base, but I would encourage you not to stop there. Have a look at what you can do on Facebook, put a promotion out, whether it's free or paid advertising. Look into your database to see if there are any past runners, or more excitingly, look at your corporate partners. If you've got one, they're probably looking to give back in another way to your organization. So think about getting them to challenge their employees to form a team and support you in an upcoming event. Activate your fundraisers, so anything you can give them to make them feel warm and fuzzy, and encourage them on their way, such as t-shirts, water bottles, whatever you've got. But the personalized journey always goes a long way. And with that, communicate to them. So keep up regular communication, training tips, cause messaging, encourage them to lift and increase their goals if they're achieving them. All of that are essentially our top tips to get you on your way in MCE events. So that actually wraps out the 3 pillars. So just touching on, obviously, we're Blackboard, we are committed to powering good in the world, especially within the social good sector. And we wanted to share with you. We understand we obviously have a number of platforms available, but if you are embarking on doing peer-to-peer fundraising, these are sort of the top things that you want to have within your toolkit to make sure you're going to be as successful as you can be. So you want to be able to do campaign-based fundraising, so give more specifics. So even with community, we touched on having the different channels available because it provides inspiration, helps you on a database side. You want feature-rich supporter pages. It's best that supporters have something to engage with whilst they're fundraising rather than just something that's set and forget. You obviously want it integrated into social. Things like fitness apps will go a long way to driving engagement as well and open up your opportunities in terms of the types of events that you can run. And then you want optimized donation forms, automated communications where possible, and then some additional elements which help tap into those corporate partners of yours. And then an exciting feature, which is donor cover. It costs money to make money, but you can actually, there's some great features out there which help have your supporters give a little bit extra to ensure that you as a charity are receiving as much or all of their initial intended donation as much as possible. So as I said, Blackboard's here to help greater power to, provide you greater power to amplify your cause and brand, provide meaningful giving experiences to your peer-to-peer community. So we don't just want them to be, same old. We really want them to be rich and meaningful to your supporters. And obviously, we know you're all time poor and struggling to sort of often get things off the ground. We have an expert team with a wide range of digital solutions to help you save time and resources and also money in the long run. So that actually brings us to the end. I'm going to ask Tina if you're able to share any of the questions that may have come through whilst we were presenting.
Great, thanks, Ben and Jess. We do have a few questions. The first one is, do you feel that the difficulty of the challenge plays an important role in how much is raised, or is this tied more closely to other factors?
Thanks, Tina. That's a really good question. I've pulled some data on this before across our platform, and yes, there is a correlation to the endurance style or strenuous level, so to speak, of a challenge they will typically fundraise more. In my reporting, it was the endurance runs that raised the most amount of money, with an average of about $4,500. The cycles came next. And then some sort of fear-based things like abseils can do really well as well. But yes, the type of challenge, if it's really scary, it also means that, or really endurance-based, means that they're going to probably be telling more people about it.
Yeah.
You know, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is really full on. Therefore, there's more opportunities for the planning. They might have to train for it, so there's more time for them to be sharing with their networks what they're doing, and therefore they raise more money. So yeah.
Thank you. Next question is, asking people who are already passionate supporters to do more is a delicate issue. Apart from building a relationship where it's then appropriate to ask, any tips on going about this?
Jack?
Yeah. I'll jump in here. Yeah, it is always a delicate situation, and obviously it's dependent on your specific charity and how you're engaging with your audience. We always recommend that asks are done in a consistent manner. You're not just sort of, they might support you or donate and then wait 18 months and then make that direct ask. But that's where we find things like multi-charity events and also community fundraising, making the asks, I guess, softer. So building them into newsletters, and more so featuring them or promoting them, will often help, I guess, spark the interest from those existing supporters. The other thing is, it depends what type of existing supporter. So often, we'll see that regular givers might lapse, and often charities will think, okay, that's unfortunately the end of that relationship, but that just might mean that their capacity to give themselves may have changed. However, they may still be very passionate about your organization and be more than willing to run a marathon or fun run in a multi-charity event, or do a DIY fundraiser for you. So I think it's, yes, whilst it can be a sensitive topic, I think it's how you go about making the ask for the supporter.
Yep. And it's really giving people an opportunity to lift their voice around why they love your cause so much. So the fundraising ask can be very soft, almost non-existent sometimes. Rather, get involved, sign up to this and join us because we're wanting to raise awareness, and then funds can come as a byproduct. And volunteers are great for that too. Sometimes organizations are a bit wary of going to their volunteers because they already give so much, but what they've got is a lot of heart. And if you can invite them to join a campaign where you're not so heavy on the dollars, but more about, let people know why you care, then we see really nice participation from volunteers.
Thank you. The next question is, the amounts given in the examples show great results, but what was the cost involved in raising these funds? So cost versus amount raised.
There were quite a few stats shared, and different case studies. Obviously, you've got, more general DIY community fundraising versus the, specific virtual events, etc. So it does vary greatly. What I would say is that pretty much everything we shared with you was digital and truly digital. So from, I guess, a provider platform's perspective, the costs are actually quite low compared to the return that they saw. I can't share specifics, obviously, but, Bowel Cancer, for example, over the last 2 years raised, nearly $345,000 odd dollars. I can tell you their investment would have likely been well under $10,000, so your return on investment is definitely quite significant. Often with an event-based style, getting your year one costs are going to be higher, especially in a virtual event sense, than your year 2, 3, and so on event costs, because you're kind of establishing the website and the concept, but once it's up and running, it's quite easy to reuse year over year. So it's hard to say, and we welcome that specific conversation. If someone's got, certain budget or certain aspirations and looking to have more specific return on investment figures, then we welcome that conversation.
Yeah. And the entry level into a platform like ours is in the hundreds. It's not in the thousands. It's in the hundreds, and that enables you to gain access to all of those major community events and dip your toe in the water and see how you go. And it also, can power DIY fundraising as well. And I would say that, the various platforms out there is probably fairly similar in that boat. So reasonably low cost to entry to give it a try.
Okay, next question is, are there any multi-charity events which don't involve running or extreme exercise? This is from a charity which supports eating disorders.
Love it. I love it. Well, there's swims, non-fitness based ones.
Give it up style events are often quite good. So, giving something up or like changing. Yeah, it's hard because often you'll find that events are created around activities that people are often already doing. That's a good question. There's always something though.
For an organisation like that, if there's no MCE, you'd be best to come up with your own signature style campaign. So it would be essentially a single charity event as opposed to a multi-charity event. And you'd come up with a concept that works specifically in with your cause. Because, I can't think of any MCEs at the moment that are non-fitness related, but you've got me thinking now.
Great, thank you. Next question. How do you manage the risk of brand damage if a fundraiser does something dangerous or off-brand?
Look, I've had this question a couple of times. You get a page notification email when someone creates a page, and so you can check it out. There's profanity filters in there. I've had one, in my 8 years, I had one organisation call me and say, Jess, I've got a fundraiser who's not quite using my brand wording in the way that we like. What should I do? And I recommended that they just give them a call. Because, you've got the data in the back end, so you can call that fundraiser and have a conversation with them and, set them straight. If you really have to shut down the page, then that's possible, but we always recommend a conversation first. But in all of my time, I haven't known of a page that's ever been shut down. Ben, have you? No? No. So, yep.
Okay. Can you track what type of fundraising people are doing for you?
Yes, through reporting. If you've set up channels and if you've set up campaigns specifically, then you can track quite granular information in your reporting, so you'll be able to find out what they're doing for you. Yes.
Okay, and final question, have the major events declined in terms of fundraising?
It's always hard to say because there's so many events, and some sort of are seeing slight declines. If anything, we've probably seen a decline in participation more so, but what we have seen is that fundraising has actually sort of the individual amounts raised by fundraisers on average has increased. So whilst the overall result might slightly decline, what individual fundraisers are raising is increasing. And really, I think that sort of just speaks to the idea that there are so many opportunities available. So it's about finding what works for your supporters. And that's where the idea of virtual events and sort of having a wide array of options in your fundraising portfolio is a good way to go, because you might have someone that does a fun run, a major event, 3 years running, and then they're just, the same weekend every year for 3 years, it becomes a little too much. So having something else that they can then step into can be quite powerful as well.
Yeah. And speaking to that, it's really about creating a nice, clean pathway on your website. So, at the beginning of the year, you'll have a support us page on your website. Make sure that you've strategically thought about what you want to promote and put everything up there on your website. So you've got nice links. People can self-serve. They can find what they want to do. You've got good information up there, and then just make sure you update it in the following year. That's what we see a lot of organizations doing. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Jess and Ben. Was there anything you wanted to add before we wrap up?
No, I think that might be everything. I'm not sure if Tina, you're going to touch on this, but Blackboard is obviously a partner of Connecting Up. So I dare say you can jump onto the Connecting Up website and have a more detailed look at Blackboard and what we have available for you. We obviously welcome a conversation if you want to just chat through this in any more detail, and we can provide more specific answers for you and your organisation.
Great. Thank you so much, Jess and Ben, for presenting today. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. I hope you've all learnt a lot from the presentation and that your questions have been answered. If you do have any other questions that come to mind later on or any feedback, please send that through to events@connectingup.org and we can answer those offline. You can also contact Jess and Ben directly via the information on your screen. Don't forget the recording will be available on our website very shortly and a link will be sent to you, so keep an eye out on your inbox. We will include the information in this email about the Blackboard offers through Connecting Up so that you can have a look at that as well. Again, thank you for being with us. Enjoy the rest of your day and we look forward to seeing you all next time. Thanks, Jess. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Tina. Thanks, everyone. Bye.